Hopefully, most of you have already seen this view here. This is me being logged in as Avassa Systems at Z Control. And well, I'm not going to walk you through this. I will jump straight to, as I mentioned, I have an Edge node. It's called Kontoret, which is Swedish for the office. And we are ready actually and to look and see that it's actually booted. It's also called home. It's got an HSM. It's got data encryption enabled. So it looks good. There's nothing particularly weird going on here. It is healthy and up and running. And with that, I'm going to switch over and just show you that since we want to build a little bit of an ambitious infrastructure at the edge here, I've already pre-installed 2 hosts or 2 applications, 2 VMs on this host, because I want to build a 3-host or 3 VM cluster here for failover capabilities or for rolling upgrades. So these 2 are already in flight, up and running. And what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to use the marketplace to fire up a 3rd one. So I go to Marketplace, Edge Apps. And to no one's surprise, there's an Avassa Edge Enforcer app here. And I click the little rocket, and that will take me through the structured steps that is required to start an app or a VM on a known and ready node here. So I'm going to say that, yes, indeed, this is the Edge Enforcer app. I'm going to say that this belongs to the default project. And that means that I get access to the Office node. I'll click through to next. I'm just going to call this host 3 because host 1 and 2 are already taken. And that looks good. We got a network adapter. This is the only configuration parameter needed for the Edge Enforcer Z Control Marketplace app. And it's, of course, the URL for the control tower, because as I mentioned before, as you stand up and as you instantiate Edge Enforcers, they're going to call home to a control tower. It's going to register itself, authenticate and authorize itself, and it's going to tell the control tower about the resources available to it, in this case, in the VM that it's running in. And when that's concluded, that's when we're ready to start deploying containerized applications on top of it. So with that behind us, we're going to click through and we should be good. We are ready to deploy. And I just want to see here that we have started the process. I'm going to go back to the Edge app instances, hit host 3 here and just look at events. And yes, created active. So now we're coming alive here. This actually takes a moment or two, or actually a minute or two even, because it's a virtual machine. We need the image, we need it to get booted, we need to get network access. So I'm going to head over and do some preparatory steps in the Avassa UI. So now I did that switch over. Now we are in the Avassa platform. So I switched hats away from Patrick, the IT team, into Applifer, the application team. And what you'll see here is that we actually have a couple of nodes installed already. So we have about 20 sites already ready here. And on top of this, of course, in the background, we're now adding the 21st site. And I just wanted to show you what it takes now to prepare an application for deployment. And then when the newly started cluster comes up, we're going to actually deploy the application. So we click over here to applications. And of course, as with most web UIs, you'll see on the left side things we can do with this system. And I'm going to focus on the definition of sites, applications, and deployments here, because this is a very brief demo. There are a number of other features here, including distributed registries. We have a distributed secrets manager based on vaults. We have a deep tenancy model. We have resource profiles and many other things. But we're going to stick to the definition of sites, applications, and deployments here for today. And what I've done is that I've prepared an application. And it's called Visitor Counter. It is actually one of those applications that is really growing in the retail vertical, but it's a little bit of a made-up application in this case. And as you can see in this web UI here, we literally have two types of users, one that lives their lives in YAML or JSON. So we'd like to show that as well for full transparency, but also people that like to stay inside of the web UI abstraction here. So I prepared a very basic application called Visitor Counter. It's got a single container. It's got a single environment variable that is going to pick up from a vault here. So it's a very, very kind of basic application. Now, in centralized environments, when you configure an application, that usually means that you also want to deploy it. If you do this in a distributed environment, of course, defining an application is one thing, as I mentioned, for Appliford, and then formally describing where to deploy this application is a separate, but of course, equally important aspect of this. So we have configured this application. We just want to make sure that we have found the container images, and we can see that indeed we have. So it's present. We can see the build SHA of the container image that is part of the Visitor Counter application. And now we want to make sure that we've made some progress here and go back to the Z Control UI. Let's see if we have some progress. Yeah, we've state changed from booting to online, so it might actually be up and running already. And as I mentioned before, as Edge Enforcer comes online, it starts calling home to that URL that I showed you. So what we can do here is we can go and have a look to see if we have any unclaimed hosts. And indeed we do. We have 3 now. So we have 3 unclaimed hosts. So these are the 3 VMs that I have started on that Edge node through zCloud. And so they are now ready to be brought into the configured sites that I have. So I'm going to add a site here. And actually, the geolocation mechanism on the zCloud side told me that this was in Alingsås, which is a very small town in Sweden, mostly known for the fact that the potato industry got started here in the 1720s. So I'm going to name it Alingsås. I'm going to actually give it a label. I'm going to say that this is in region Europe because I want to use this later on. And then I'm going to add the 3 unclaimed sites to this, sorry, the 3 unclaimed hosts to this site. And I'm going to submit this configuration. And what this will do now, of course, that's going to create a new site. And it's going to take a moment because now we are going to give the Edge Enforcers on all 3 hosts some updated configuration. And actually, if needed, also update the infrastructure components, the Edge Enforcer, the agent here, if needed. So we're going to give this a moment, and it's awaiting call home. All the call home processing always starts at the edge, obviously, because most of the users in this kind of environment won't allow a centralized control tower to reach out to the edge in itself. So we'll hopefully have this up and running here in a couple of seconds. And what's going to happen now that we also realize that they're all co-located, as I mentioned, we're also going to put them in a failover cluster so that, for example, if we have applications running in this environment and we need to do rolling upgrades of the underlying infrastructure by using zCloud, of course, then we can reschedule applications across these 3 hosts as needed. So we're getting there. We have 2 of the hosts now up and healthy. And we can, of course, go in and look at them and look at what kind of resources is available here, reported back. And you can see that it reports through SMBIOS and DMI what it is that we get access to through the virtualization layer provided by the ZEDEDA platform. And we're actually good. We are up and running with 3 hosts. So at this point, we should actually be able to start deploying applications to this and to other nodes here. And as I mentioned, that's a separate step. So what we're going to do now is define an application deployment. So we're going to call this the Visitor Counter deployment. And we're going to point to the one application that we have. And we're going to say this is version 1.0. And we're going to use label matching. to say, where do we want to run this? So here's where we're going to say region equals Europe. So that's going to match on 9 sites. And this is an idempotent system. So we're going to go and do a fresh deployment in all 9 of them. And we're also going to actually use a canary stage. So let's say we use Finland for the canary stage. So that's a single host. We'll make it a manual action. So now we're actually ready to deploy this application onto a combination of the sites that we had already up and running and the very newly installed 3-node cluster that I just turned up using the ZEDEDA infrastructure here. So we're going to hit submit new deployment here, create that, go over to this view, wait for Helsinki to finish because that's our canary step. And this is the amount of time it usually takes to pull the container image into the local registry in the local cluster because we need the availability of them there. So we're now up and running in Helsinki with that application. We can click through, make sure that the container is happy. We can, even if we want to, log into the container just to make sure that everything looks good. So now we're actually in the container running on that location. So not actually on the host, because that's usually Platrik's responsibility, but in the container. And that's where Applifer, of course, needs to go if she wants to check how things are going. We can do mean things like killing the command, force a rescheduling of the application, and make sure that it actually comes up again. And then we can go back, look at the deployment, and continue that. So that's going to deploy the application to all the sites, including, of course, to our newly started cluster in Alingsås. It's going to take the same time here to pull the container images in. And we're good. So now we can see that, again, the application is called Visitor Counter, first versions, that is up and running, and all the locations that it's running on is actually connected, including our newly started cluster here running on Z-Control or on Z-Cloud. That's it. That's what I wanted to show you, this nice handover from the infrastructure team into the application team, the definition of an application, the definition of where to run it, and how to get that up and running in a monitored and observable fashion here.